Good evening and welcome to Inception Live. I'm Gloria. Welcome back, everybody. Tonight, I have a very, very special guest, and I'm going to premise this with a short statement. We both have a very good friend, Rob Gauthier, the E.T. Whisperer, and I do catch up on everyone's shows now and again. And I'd never heard of William before. And I just clicked on Rob's show, and he was introducing this gentleman and having a conversation. I fell in love with the conversation, with the experiences, with his spiritual journey, and said, you guys need to hear him over here in the UK. So William Stowell, got it right. Welcome to Inception Live.
Well, thank you for having me, Gloria. It's really nice to be here with you guys.
Lovely, bubbly. Now, because your first time on the show, and on either show, because we have Open Minds, and I will bring William onto Open Minds later on, can you give us a brief bio of your sort of human existence, a rough idea where you've been, what you've been doing up to this point?
Well, I can give you the basic, David Copperfield type details. I was born in New York, Long Island, New York, in December of 1981. So I tell people I'm the last member of Generation X, which is a kind of its own thing. I grew up in New York in the 1980s and 1990s. And then in 1995, I believe it was, I moved to a little town called Fincastle, Virginia, which is where I'm at right now in Fincastle, beautiful Fincastle, Virginia. Which is in the Appalachian Mountains. For if anybody's interested in that type of geography, we have beautiful wine trails and hiking trails and all types of lush plants and things growing here. But my life was pretty typical. I went to high school here in Virginia, which that's grades 9 through 12 for those of you who are British. The last 4 years of public education, and then I joined the U.S. Air Force. I signed up in 1999 and went active duty out in the far off year of 2000, which they really hyped up to us when I was a kid. In the year 2000, everything's just going to magically be great. And now here we are 22 years later.
Yeah.
But I did an enlistment in the Air Force, and then I would say my life, even though those things are pretty standard, for, people go to school and join the military, get out of their little hometown. I've always dabbled in, we'll say, eccentricities along the way. I've always had peculiar interests and things that have kind of deviated me from the norm. And rather than bore you with the details of my life up until that point, I had always really sort of been interested in the paranormal. It was always in the background of my life. I didn't really find out about channeling until the year 2004, when my uncle died, and through a series of events, I was led to the Seth Material. Somebody recommended the Seth Material to me by the famous Jane Roberts. And I was hooked immediately. It changed absolutely everything for me, but not as quickly as I would like. I was still, I would say, living a rather pedestrian life. And then maybe around, God, it's amazing how these details get blurred out, but maybe 2014 or 15, I discovered Rob Gauthier, the E.T. Whisperer. And that's kind of how I became aware that there were modern day channelers out there doing this sort of thing. And ever since meeting him, my life has kind of become more and more metaphysical, if that makes any sense.
Yeah, it does.
I've been able to put into, because we all, I would imagine, the people that watch this type of programming, we understand these things intellectually, about the spiritual world, but, to actually have it simpatico with the way you actually conduct your life and live your life takes quite some
Absolutely.
practice.
Can I just take you back a bit? So
yes,
let's go back to when you started to get interested in the Seth Material. I too, way back in the day, it was my first port of call. And talking to other people and listening to other shows, many people hit the Seth Material first. When I hit the Seth Material, I didn't even understand what channeling meant. Because I was a medium, I thought it was just a spirit talking through, like trance mediumship or something. So I had no comprehension at that point. But listening to Jane Roberts and the materials and the conversations, it shifted me in a way that I never understood. How were you affected when you started to listen to the Seth Materials at that point?
Well, it was as if, and my wife at the time, Amanda, came up with this because she also got into the Seth Material. She said that it was as if she had left an instruction manual to life for herself to find. Mm-hmm. And I can't find a more succinct description than that. It was as it's like if I knew I was going to have to endure this human experience, which I don't feel like I'm enduring it. I actually feel quite happy here now. Mm-hmm. But at the time, back in 2004, I had a 1-year-old child. I just gotten her out of the military. It was a different world. I'm like, I felt like if I had to endure a human experience, mm-hmm. I was going to leave something, an artifact here on the planet for myself to find to help mm-hmm. me along the way. That's exactly how I felt. And I'm not the only one who's described it this way, that as you're reading it, it's as if you already knew it anyway.
Yeah. It's a knowing. Like, oh yeah. Right. I mean, there's a difference, and you can tell that. It's like, if you go, I remember going to, when I was at university, and, the different pathways I took, and one of them was the youth justice system. So I had to learn the legal side. So as I was learning, I realized I was learning something new, and it was repetitive, and I had to practice, and then I had to pass. But what you're saying is, with the Seth Material, there was no learning. It was an instant knowing, like you've always known. That's for anyone in the audience. If we haven't explained it correctly, do you resonate with that? That's how you just know it. You know it. There's a difference.
I just knew it. Knew it. It was, now, as I was saying earlier, you're putting it into practice in your life. That's why it's called practice. It's taking some time. And even now, and I think a lot of people will have this experience, you might have certain aspects of your life totally handled and under control where you're excelling. And then other parts of your life, you're a complete novice.
You're an arsehole. You're just an absolute arsehole at it.
It's not, like, you just suck.
It's like something comes in and you master that, and then you fuck up on the other thing. You think, oh, I've had enough. What do I need to do? And then you master that. So when you read this Seth Material, because I wanted to stay here for a bit, were you aware of what we call ET or dimensional beings or whoever? Had you had, it's a two-part question, any experiences prior to reading the Seth Material?
Oh, absolutely. I absolutely had. I was I don't want to say victim. I was a participant of the abduction experience back in New York in the 1980s. Mm-hmm. And it was a very confusing time for me. Like, very confusing. It got me a visit from, of course, a Catholic priest had to come in and bless the house, because at the time it could only be the devil. There was no other explanation. It was clearly the devil, and we needed a Catholic priest to fix this. Also, child psychologists, psychiatrists, whatever that fine distinction is between the two. I saw them all. But I was being taken from my bedroom, and I was having these experiences. And in a way, it's kind of like the Seth Material, is that as it was happening, I knew what was happening, even though I didn't know what was happening. And even now, when I reflect back on the time in my life, the timeline is so jumbled. It's like I didn't know whether I knew it was going to happen or if it had been happening. I can't explain it. Like,
I understand. I have I've been a contactee since birth, and I find it very hard to put things. It's all jumbled in a timeline, because the linear time and everything just goes. There is no context for it. It seems like the only way I can relay that is with up to the most recent contact. It's a continuum. There's no years. It's I feel for me. It feels like it's ongoing now, always.
I think I could put it in. I have a way of maybe relating it to people and stuff. My grandfather died in 1989, and this is the first real up close and personal death that I had experienced in my family. Yes, I had seen dead people, and I knew it was a thing, but it was the first close relationship that I had to experience. And I was there when he had a heart attack. The ambulance took him away, And then I can't tell you if it was 2 hours or 3 days that they came back in, and my mother and father are sitting my sister and I down and telling us that they tried everything. Grandpa died. But as they were explaining it to me, it's like I knew exactly how the scene was going to play out, as if I had seen or lived this scene sometime before in my life.
Mm-hmm.
And, as it was playing out, I went through the emotions of it. I really felt it, but I also felt like I was going through the motions of emotion, if that makes sense. Like it was some predetermined thing.
Yeah.
And the same thing with the abduction experience. The only way that I was able to put it in context was on the television at the time. There was a couple Life magazine books and different book series that dealt with alien beings and pyramids and abductions. It would have been considered the fringe at the time.
Yeah.
That was the other thing. I don't know the average age of your viewers or anything like that, and I certainly don't.
All ages.
All ages. Well, in the 1980s in the United States, this was reserved for the lunatic fringe.
Yeah.
This was not discussed in polite society. But on these like late night television commercials or adverts, I suppose, as you say over there, there was a book they were advertising, and it had a gray alien on it. The prototypical alien with the big eye, and it just sent me back into absolute terror.
Yeah.
And it jogged something. Go ahead, go.
So I was going to say, I'm sorry, same here. About 1987, around about that time, I had no idea that these bug-eyed beings were not just dead people, weird, until I saw a picture of a book cover on the internet, and it was Whitley Strieber's book, and I just shat. That was it. That everything just changed, because all of a sudden everything was a lie, and this I had been seeing this coming through walls. The bigger I'd been seeing that for that point, I just was destroyed.
I'm glad that you said that, because the same thing happened to me. I'd be in my cafeteria in grade school, we're talking, and I would see these things, and I couldn't believe that nobody else could see it.
Yeah.
It's like, it's so obvious, it's right there, and I don't. It's hard to piece all of that together. Growing up now.
Yeah, I mean, hold on a sec. It is hard, but before we move on. Can you tell us at that point when you had this realization? Oh my God, I am communicating. Whatever you processed it. I am interacting, commuting, whatever with these beings. How did that change your reality around you at the time? After you, we broke down. After that, what did that do to you personally, on a personal level, do you think?
It made me. It created my lifelong nemesis of the system, the education system, the medical community, organized religion, because there was no doubt in my mind that what was happening to me was authentic. It was never going to entertain for a moment. It's the 1980s. I'm a kid. Like, insanity is not even. You don't really understand insanity like that unless you've lived with it up close and personal. So the idea that my mind was somehow defective was completely off the table for me. And I saw all at once very clearly, I'm never going to get the understanding of the help that I need. There are no trusted teachers or trusted priests or friendly advisors that can ever really understand you. And I understood at that time, at a very early age, that I myself must be the instrument of my own salvation, because there was nobody outside of me that would even acknowledge my internal experience.
Yeah. Now, I agree. I mean, the experiences affect people differently, but most experiences, when another experience has a slightly different experience with it, totally gets it, totally understands it, and that's how it should be. Now, I'm going to come in here and. Who were the beings? Were they the Greys for you? Just the Greys at that time?
Yes, they were. They were definitely Greys. I have a vague recollection of mantoids, giant praying mantis, basically.
Yeah.
But I don't have. That's kind of like on the periphery of my experience. And the other thing was, just to take it back to the 1980s for people who weren't there. What was I going to do? Go on an internet chat room and talk to somebody about this? If there were any groups out there at the time, because I was involved in even up into the 90s, I was involved in, we'll say, activist groups for other causes. And even then, they were sending out like mimeographed newsletters. Like, where were you going to find?
Yeah.
Where were you going to find anyone to talk to
There
about
was
this?
no one. I mean, the only solace I ever got, I would secretly stalk Art Bell and everything. Yeah, I would listen, wait for, and some of the guests he had on, I wasn't interested. I was just waiting to see. I didn't know any terminology. I didn't know anything until a guest come on where ET contact abduction came in. That's where I kicked off, was Art Bell. That was the first one for me, because there was nothing.
It's funny, I didn't really find Art Bell until the late 90s. I was driving a street sweeper truck at night, and it only had an AM radio in it. And, that's how I found Art Bell. I wish I had known about him years earlier, because, I had access to an AM radio my entire life. I could have been listening to Art Bell, especially in New York. I'm sure he was syndicated in New York at the time. I wish I had found that. There were little things along the way. There were always the things that I gravitated to more than anything were people like, and I would imagine that even the British audience would know about a lot of these people, particularly Arthur C. Clarke.
Yeah.
You have to know Arthur C. Clarke over there. When he had his World of Strange Powers and Arthur C. Clarke's Mysterious World. And if you don't know his demeanor, he spoke about these things in a very investigating, professorial way, so that, and more on that later, actually, so that it was a serious scientific inquiry. Then there were people like Carl Sagan and Leonard Nimoy's In Search Of. We had Unsolved Mysteries, and then later in the early 1990s, I think it was 91. They had a television program here called Sightings that was put out by Linda Moulton Howe, which I think she wrote the book in Alien Harvest. I'm remembering right. You're going back 30 years now. But they talked about it. And the thing about anything that could get on television in that area about that time, because it was considered such a fringe topic, anything that you would see about it, they had to handle it with such decorum.
Yeah.
Because it was always, it's not like stuff you see today, like supposed ghost hunters going around in a graveyard with a night vision cam. It was done in the form of serious inquiry. So I feel like I got a lot of good information because of that. For instance, I am a huge fan of the Ghostbusters from 1984. And I would imagine about the Ghostbusters.
Yes.
It's a worldwide phenomenon. Well, they just released the third movie in that franchise, Ghostbusters Afterlife. And as a result, they haven't had one out since I think it was 89 and 90 or something. And so now with the internet, all this old footage is resurfacing, as it tends to do from back in the day. And I saw Dan Aykroyd and Bill Murray on the Johnny Carson show. Now, Dan Aykroyd, his credentials are totally in order today. It's like, it's Dan Aykroyd. Everybody loves Dan Aykroyd. But back then, to see him on the Johnny Carson show in 1984, and while he's on there, he's talking about Ghostbusters, which is about to come out, but he's making a pitch for a paranormal society in New York. And he's like, with the Ghostbusters, we treat this with a lot of levity and humor in the movie, but there are scientists in New York who take this very seriously. He brought in a copy of a paranormal journal. He brought in a picture of his grandfather. Dan Aykroyd's grandfather was a medium also. And while he's doing this, the poor guy is shaking and the audience is laughing at him.
Yeah.
That he's giving any of this any seriousness. Now, who in their right mind would laugh at Dan Aykroyd today for saying ghosts are?
Oh, no. I mean, today, what this discussion we're having now, this conversation, is mainstream. It's the norm. Where it's normal.
That's exactly. Just to finish my idea real quick, Gloria. That's what I'm saying is that back then he was probably taking a real risk mentioning any of that on television. And so that's why the things that I did see were done in such a way, that they all their notes were checked, their sources were in order, they didn't make any outrageous claims, and it was just good quality paranormal investigating that you don't get anymore.
No. I mean, as I said, I loved the Ghostbusters way back in the day. I loved being a medium myself and, seeing ghosts, dead people. I thought it was a good take on it. I did. Moving along from there, how can I put this? when was it that there comes a point, so I'm hearing from many other people, we go in and out of the contact experiences. We have this profound paradigm shift, and then we go back to being ourselves and normal life and girls, boys, and, all things happen, shit hits the fan. And then we go back in. Can you identify on your journey, was there one key point where it sort of opened up again, but never really, like you've shifted a timeline, it never really went back to the way it was? Was there any major contact or moment, paranormal?
There was, well, back when I was younger, there was this one particular, the most vivid experience I had. I woke up in my house, couldn't tell you if this was a dream or real. But at a certain point, it doesn't even matter because the emotions that it elicits change your life.
Yeah.
I walked out to my living room. I look outside, and there was a craft hovering just right above my street, and these beings were coming out of it. And the terror that I felt was just like nothing I had ever felt since or before. And that was one of the last big things that I remember from my childhood. Occasionally I'd have sleep paralysis and a type of. You could always tell the differences in sleep paralysis. You're caught in an astral situation, or it's a contact situation. They kind of have a different quality to them. So I would have these different sleep paralysis situations where I always knew that these beings were kind of around.
Yeah.
And once I found out about the Seth Material and I started putting this into practice, I started becoming an alcoholic. Life itself was becoming too difficult to. When I battled alcoholism for years, a number of years, not right now anymore. Things are. I could probably never go back to that version of myself again. But it was. I don't mean to sound like a martyr, but it was having this higher awareness, and then living in this post 9/11 world that had gone, where everything had gone badly wrong from my point of view. Where everything was so uncertain. The paranoia was palpable. The United States, I had just gotten out of the military, so I was very sensitive to these, we'll say, our activities around the world. And I'm like, it's like everything it's gone wrong, and I know that there's this reality out there where human beings could head towards this true golden age. And my God, how are we ever going to get there? Alcoholism is a many faceted problem. It wasn't just that, but,
alcohol, I never did drugs, but I did alcohol. But I kept trying to do alcohol to block everything out. However, never worked with spirits for some unknown reason. Some people, some mediums, if they drink, it works. For me, it's just no. If I go past a certain point, no, I'm fucked. So I soon gave up on that. I didn't become an alcoholic, but I would try and drown it out, all the experiences all the time. And then I gave up because I just felt like shit the next day. I thought it's not worth it because it didn't work. However, I hear of many people that have gone down this road, whether becoming addicted to drugs, alcohol, or something, trying to just, because they can't fit in. You can't fit in to, I did attempt suicide as a teenager because I couldn't fit in. I didn't belong. So, for many people that are just hearing about contact and ET experiences, not UFO sightings, experiences, is there's a very deep personal aspect to this that affects each individual differently. And it sometimes suicide seems the only way out, alcohol or any other way, because as you rightly said prior, back in the day, there was nothing out there to give you the support. And I even found, and I've said this before, later on when all the shows were coming out, I tried to contact MUFON and all of them, but they weren't interested in the experience and the consciousness communication. It was all about the craft. So I felt there was a divide there. So I pulled away from that as well, because to me, it was always about the experience. How did you find that? How did you find that part of it when you started to search and get information on this?
Well, because I had found the Seth Material, the contact experience had taken on a greater would you call it, a greater quality to it. It became more multifaceted.
Yeah.
And so, and this was the thing for me. You talk about help. I was taught after getting out of the military. I foolishly went to counselors for veterans at the Veterans Hospital, and you try and explain to them, well, I believe that the physical world, down to its most minute detail, springs from the deepest part of my inner being and consciousness, and that down to the people, you see where this is going. So that did not get me the help I needed, and only in fact reinforced what I was saying earlier, is that the medical community, the religious community, your political leaders, you're on your own in a sense.
I think most I mean, not so much today, but
no, well, we haven't gotten there yet in our little timeline because the internet hadn't really become what it is.
No,
this is maybe the past decade at the most that it's really been where we could do this. In 2004, we had the internet, we had YouTube in 2005.
But we still couldn't express it like this. I mean, still there are some today. I mean, I was diagnosed with schizophrenia as a teenager. I've been told I was a child of the devil, all of its demons, because I was seeing dead people as well. So I was, really in the mix. And being there, done it and did it. And today, now and again today, you get the extremists in whatever field they're in, whether they're religious or scientific, fundamentalist sort of way. It's demons, but it's not like before. It's not. Mm-hmm. And the ridicule has stopped. Right.
Well, those organizations don't have a stranglehold on the community like they did once before. Do you remember what it was like to imagine having questioned a doctor 40 years ago? Like they were basically God, living, breathing, and walking. Now they're basically schmucks like everyone else.
Yeah, absolutely. It is a new paradigm we're in now. Okay, we've covered that area. So what I would like to do for the last part of the show, we're halfway through, is I want to bring it to our favorite person in the world, Rob. However, but I want to, from your perception, from your experience, first of all, if you don't know, guys, Rob Gauthier, the ET Whisperer, he's been on my Open Minds chat show, is a channeler and of dimensional, I call them dimensional beings. I'm not a lover of ET so much now because see my truths change. And when you talk to Rob, I know from a personal aspect, when I first spoke to him, I like the shift. Whatever happened. I can't even explain it. So coming from your perspective, your journey, how first did you link with Rob? And then please tell us the journey you've had with him since.
Well, just to bring everyone up to speed, Rob channels many different beings, but he has two main ones. And the primary one is a giant benevolent reptilian hybrid, basically a giant lizard guy named Trebur Yitney.
Yes.
And
who I fell in love with, the energy.
Yes. Oh, fantastic energy. And well, let's start with Treb. It was, and I wish I could be more precise about it. It's funny. I could tell you what I was doing in 1986, but when I met Rob, maybe it was January of 2013 or 14. Okay. I don't know. But back in that time, YouTube was a much more fun place to be, and it would constantly suggest crazy videos and stuff. And I'm working around the house. I've got my laptop up playing YouTube, and every time a video ends, a new one would come on. And it got stuck on this string where I'm hearing this guy just give the best wisdom you could possibly give. And I'm listening to him, and in my mind, I thought it was an old Chinese man, like a Mr. Miyagi type guru or something.
Yeah.
But no, it was a giant lizard person. And this is, again, how I'm like, oh, wait. Oh, he's channeling a space alien. Okay, I had never heard of this before. Mm-hmm. I didn't even give it any pause that it was unusual. There's certainly nothing unusual about that in the circles I run in. I'm like, man, I want to, because for me, it seems really ignorant to think of this at the time. But I thought that channeling was a skill that cropped up like once or twice in a generation, in all of humanity. And then I come to find out you've got channelers out there. You could have baseball teams full of channelers, some far better than the others. We'll leave it at that. And Rob is one of the best, if not the best, working channeler today, in my opinion. but just the quality of the information he gives. So I'm listening to Treb, and I'm like, this sounds like the Seth Material. Like I can get on with this. I don't join groups or organizations. I don't subscribe to any one particular philosophy. I don't wear uniforms. I don't march in the streets. I don't clot with other human beings. But this sounded like something that I could become a part of. And I found, the ET Whisperer. I'm like, that's clever. So I started listening to him, and I listened to him for a long time. And then Rob was on and I had no idea anything about Rob. You know, he's I was a little starstruck with him, which, it doesn't. I've been on a lot of different television programs with a lot of different famous people, and even working intimately with them. Anybody that's that has a public persona like that, I don't want to use the word starstruck, but I can't think of a better word. I'm kind of
starstruck's good with Rob.
Right, good. Because I'm in awe of the work he does. Like it's about his professionalism and his craft.
Yeah.
Like I was on the Penn and Teller show back in 2005. I've been on Good Morning America. I'm certainly no stranger to dealing with famous people, but I wanted to. It never occurred to me that I would ever talk to Rob in any capacity whatsoever. Yeah. But he was as a guest on another show, and I won't go into all the particulars or anything, but they were interviewing him, and he said a couple things that I disagreed with. I'm like, that's not right, from my point of view. So I was a famous YouTuber at the time as well. I was running a program called Fincastle Underground, and I made a private video that I sent to Rob. And I'm like, well, hell, he'll never see that. But I watched the video that he did, the interview, and I took meticulous notes about the things. And because I have a background in sociology, if college teaches you anything, it's how to do debating and counterpoint and proving your thesis. So I took notes of what Rob was saying, and I put up my counterpoint, and and then I made a video where I just went through and I read this. Well, he made a video back to me. And I'm like, we're about to start some kind of YouTube turf war. But no, he was very kind and gracious, and actually admitted that I might have had a few points. I'm like, wow, that's crazy. Because even though Rob channels these beings who have wisdom and information that we don't quite access ourselves, I'm not going to say we don't have access to it, but they have a perspective and wisdom and information that we have not learned how to master at this stage of our development as a collective. Just because Rob is the medium for this information doesn't mean that he's living his life the way that he knows he should be sometimes. And I don't think I'm saying too much about Rob. I'm not saying that he's a bad guy, but he has these struggles that other people have. That's a misconception that he always tries to dispel with people, because you think he'd be something like up there with the angels or something.
Yeah. He's a normal guy.
His tire gets flat. He runs out of gas. He's got to pay bills. He's got to do dishes. Got to change diapers. And that's one of the things that always resonated with me about. This is why I started supporting Rob on Patreon, is because after reading the Seth Material, if you read the Seth books, Jane's husband, who's also named Rob, he would take very, very fastidious notes about what was going on. And there was all this amazing material there. And then if you read Rob's notes, Rob and Jane, they were just a couple trying to get through it like anybody else. They had their refrigerator broke down, and they're looking for a place to live. And I'm like, well, I never wanted to lose sight of the fact that although Rob was providing this great information, that there was a human being and a human family and a couple behind all of this, and they're not living on love and light and sunshine. They got to make rent.
They're paying rent, and they're just being normal people. I mean, I want to just hold it there. I mean, there are many out there who have gone into the field, the realms and field of channeling. And at the beginning, very much like Rob. But then later on, something changed, and they become inaccessible to the majority. One thing Rob has always done over all of these years, I mean, he is the one and only ET Whisperer. There's no one can touch him. He's never elevated himself anywhere. He's exactly the same. There's no ego on the channeling, if that makes sense to you. And he's accessible to anyone, he's accessible to. And he always finds the time for anyone if he can. So that's my bit, 2 tuppence in there, because I'm on the same mindset as you about Rob, and his beautiful wife, Kalina, as well. So, right, you've started this video conversation. When is it that do you get a channeled message first, or do you link up producing and assisting Rob with the shows?
Oh no, that was an afterthought. I started sending him money on Patreon because, as I said, I'm like, well, he's not living on love and light and happiness, despite what some people think. Maybe we'll get there one day, but not right now.
Yeah.
And they would have special sessions just for the people that support them on Patreon. So, like, if you support Rob on Patreon, in the middle of the month, anyone that's a member, you suggest topics, and then they put them in a big hat, and everybody votes on it.
Yeah.
And whatever the winning topic is, we'll do a channeling on, or Rob will do a channeling on. And then at the second half of the month, he'll do a show where you can send in individualized questions. Every patron gets one question, and they go into a hat and get drawn out. And if you happen to win, you can then talk to Trevor Ardif or something like that. Anyway, 2 months in a row, I won questions to talk to Ardif, I believe it was. It's crazy. I don't even remember what those questions would have been. And we're going to get into that, actually, because I think that's interesting in and of itself. But Rob and Kalina were running the show entirely, and they knew that I was a patron. They knew that I was out there, and they knew that I was running a rather successful YouTube channel of my own until it was struck down by, for whatever reasons YouTube had. But it was struck down. And then Rob and Kalina had Lily, their daughter that they now have.
Mm-hmm.
And parenting I just say Rob must have been really desperate, because he called me up and he's like, hey, can you host the show? Yeah. I wasn't expecting it. And I was like, yeah, that's pretty cool. I could do that. Now I can't even tell you if it's been 2 years or 3 years now, or it's been quite some time, but that's how I got into it. I think Lily's about to be 3 years old in June or July. She's a Cancer. So whenever that she turns 3 years old, it'll be that's the amount of time that I've also been doing Rob's show. But because I have a long, extensive history doing broadcast media, I was happy to be doing that kind of work, excited I was going to be talking to space aliens. But doing broadcast media is certainly nothing unusual to me. So it was a really good fit. And I was hosting for other people. I've had a number of sessions with Ardif since then, like private sessions where I'll talk to him for an hour or so. And I've noticed in my own personal journey, and I like to think my own personal journey is a microcosm of all of this. I went from absolute terror of these gray space aliens back in the 1980s. Not that Ardif is a gray, mind you. No. But then then I found out about the ET Whisperer later on, and I'm kind of starstruck. And I don't want to say, but when I talk to these beings, and I've noticed a lot of people do this when they start off, they always do it with a lot of reverence. It's almost like a spiritual. It's almost pseudo-religious in a way, But they always, and of course, it's great to be gracious and have manners and everything, but I noticed, and I did the same thing, that when you talk to them, oh, thank you for being here and everything. And so it was like that at the beginning, where I would kind of approach them with this reverence and have particular types of questions. Now I talk to them, as if I'm talking to somebody on the streets in New York. It's I don't want to say it's even passé sometimes talking to them. But I don't, after talking to the different beings that Rob channels and Rob's himself, there's no part of them that want to be elevated on any type of pedestal. No. They're here because they're excited to be here. They're here because they want to talk to us. They don't look down on us as some kind of sub-creatures, which is like the most horrible belief that I do see in our community, is people like, well, because we're human beings, we're somehow damned. And that's not exactly the case at all. In fact, if you have that belief, that's all you're ever going to experience in that
exactly. Can I just stop in there a sec? Right. I mean, talking about obviously, when I first heard Treb, I mean, I remember years ago going on to Gaia and watching, talking with the Dimensionals. I forget the guy who did it now.
Interview with EDs or something.
Yeah, that's it. Yeah, my brain. I'm going somewhere else at the moment with the conversation, and I was listening, going through, and whatever, and then I put on this ET Whisperer. Never seen or heard him before in my life. I was aware of Seth. Okay, aware of the Seth Materials, and I was doing things because I would be doing things. I'm an artist, so I'd be doing things, painting, whatever, while I'm listening, sort of like a background. And I, on them interviews, they did one interview with the person, and then a second interview was with them channeling these beings. For some reason, I've been following the protocol on Gaia, you know, to see if I liked the actual person themselves, as you do. And I pressed the other link. I went straight to him channeling. So I'm going on, and all of a sudden I heard this. Not only, it wasn't even just the wisdom, the articulation, the knowing, it was this energy that just got me. It was like a bubble on me. And I was like, you know, like, I don't know, like being hypnotized, or a magnetic pull was taking me. And it opened me up to listen, not listen with my ears, listen with my heart. I don't know how to explain it. I fell in love with that being that day. That day. I rewatched Treb. Didn't need to hear it just to be in the energy. I'm saying that I've listened to Ardith, and I didn't connect to Ardith that way. So I'm coming back at you. Did you know, like, we meet people, we like them, we don't like them, we don't resonate. For you, was yours Ardith more so than Treb, or
well, Treb definitely drew me in.
Yeah.
And the reason that I'm a Capricorn, I'm very overly efficient. And, you know, even if that's just a belief, that's how I conduct my life. I'm overly efficient. And if I'm going to spend an hour with a space alien, Ardith is so much more parsimonious. And I'm a very intellectually oriented person, very intellectually oriented. And there's just something about Ardith, like we can bounce off of each other a lot more quickly than Treb and I can, you know. And I've asked Treb questions before, and he's certainly helped me out with many things. But I hate to say it, basically economy of time, I talk to Ardith, because with Ardith, he's always listening. Like if I have a conversation with Rob before the session starts, I tell him that I want to get the most out of this session. Ardith will tell me something. Obviously, I'll have it on recording, and I'll listen to it, and I won't find out until months or even years later that the way Ardith answered a question was so layered that it still gives me answers.
Yeah, I'm with you. Yeah,
you know, and he's so sly about it. Like when I'm hosting the show, Ardith will give an example to the community at large, but it's something going on exactly in my life. Nobody knows about it. Ardith and I hadn't talked about it, and he's clearly doing it for my benefit because I'm there hosting the show. But unless you knew what was going on, the people in the audience, like, it's great information for them. But for me, it's like perfectly and oddly specific about what's going on. So Ardith is just, I don't know, I just jive with him better. But I wanted to continue my arc from earlier. Like I was saying, that I'd like to think my own journey is a microcosm of the world, because in the 1980s, I'm living in absolute terror. And now I have these conversations with Ardith that are like almost blasé sometimes.
Yeah.
Because I'll be hosting his show, and I've got I've had recently a very busy life. Sometimes I'm there, I'm like, nobody would know because it's a radio program, and I'm like falling asleep. Like, oh, thank you, Ardith. That's really fantastic. Now on to our next question. You know, but you know, I've the idea that I could get, I don't want to say bored, it's just a function of being tired, that talking to a space alien could become so commonplace. And I think that's what will be happening for the collective as a whole, that we're not going to be ready for open contact until, because open contact will become, eventually it'll be blasé like that. It'll just be like everyone else is walking around.
Yeah, this is where I'm enjoying where this is going now. And I just want to throw in something like, after I had obviously connected with Treb, I had no idea what this treb looked like. You ready? I just the energy, and then as I started to research, and then I saw the artist rendition of this reptilian. You would not believe the fear that hit me. Now, remember, I've had the greys all my life. Hello, and but luckily, through the research I'd done, and knowing that was a belief system that had been programmed anyway. So, but I had this, always had a fear of reptilians, and I never knew why. It wasn't because I had no trauma with them, thank you very much. Now, Treb is the most loving, joyous, exciting energy anyone could interact with. He broke that fear within me, just that energy. And I interviewed Rob on the show, and as I was talking to Rob, and I said to Rob, I said, I know, even though Rob was talking, the energy was of Treb. I could feel even though it was coming through Rob, and Rob was doing, and that's when I told Rob and Kalina after that, not long afterwards, he appeared. His energy appeared, such joy I can't tell you. And he dispersed every fear I had about reptilians.
Right. So, well, that's what's happening with me. To get to my more modern encounter experiences, I live out in the country. We have a large portion of property out here. There's basically no light pollution for the time being, and we have basically 5 houses around here. My sister lives next door. My mother lives down there. We've got property. We're sitting out at my sister's house one night on her patio and looking over my mother's house, and there were UFOs, obviously UFOs. They were doing things that conventional aircraft doesn't do, and it looked like they were bilocating. You could see them, and I got a really creepy feeling from them, like a feeling from the Greys. Yeah. But I was into it. I didn't run. I'm like, oh, more of this. I even bought. Oh, where is it? Oh, yes, I have this super powered green laser.
Yeah.
As part of the CE5 protocol to try and if I see UFOs, I'm gonna shoot them with this laser. Well, not shoot them, but try and get their attention. I wouldn't have done that when I was in the 1980s as a child. And I asked Ardif about this, and he confirmed that they were actually mantoid beings affiliated with the Greys. Yeah. And they were exactly doing that. They were bilocating over my mother's house. Yeah. And it was creepy, and I picked up on that mantoid energy, but I was happy to be a part of it. Like now, whereas my childhood self would have been.
It wouldn't happen. Do you know that I find that that's a bit of synchronicity for me. After Treb, then when I had the contact experiences, and even in the bedroom, the front room, I had mantoid beings coming. I called them the toners. There was 3. And they're quite funny how they move, actually. I thought it was funny anyway. But then I had 3, and I thought they were one started. I thought was talking, and it was like a click first of all. And I went, oh, and they're talking. I was in the experience, and then the vibration got quicker and quicker. Then the second one, the third one come in, and they shot out this frequency. Anyway, that's another story. But after the experience of Treb, then the mantas come in. So it's like I had no fear. But you would have given me a reptilian when I was a kid. Dead people, the Greys. I didn't know they were the Greys. I had no fear, none. If you brought in a reptilian and a mantis being when I was a child, I would have freaked. But it's like normal now. It's normalizing. There's a normalization as it should be before how they label it open contact.
Well, not only, yes. And, I'm kind of against this idea of like disclosure. Like people are always like, well, when's the government going to tell us aliens are, what's that?
I said, it's already happened.
Right. Well, not only that, for me, it's like, I don't need the government, the U.S., any government to tell me what I already know. Exactly. And this thing I feel that this thing is going to happen when people as a whole realize that they don't need some outside agency to confirm reality to them in some way. But, I had an interesting thought too. as usually happens. Well, it's once you start understanding consciousness more, that's the other thing, and recognizing consciousness in other beings. When I see a praying mantis, I kind of look at it in a different way. I talk to them, and they almost look at me in a knowing way. I may go out of my way to save anything that I possibly can, living creatures. You know, like there was, oh my God. I saw a praying mantis in a parking lot fighting off a full-sized cat one time. It was crazy. It was crazy. We did the best we could to chase the cat off for the praying mantis, but
no, you're right. You've raised a really important part to this journey is because of the experiences and the shift in the consciousness is a process of self-realization. And when you have a realization of truly who you are, and then you see them, you know truly who they are. Even the label reptilian goes out the window, mantis goes out the window. They're just other beings. They're just other beings in this experience that we're going through. And in that in itself, when you deconstruct all of that, I always say, because there's a couple of groups I teach, it's like going in a shopping center. You see all these people, you don't know them, all fat, skinny, tall, large, ugly, beautiful, whatever, Trevor. But you don't really fear any of it. You're not really bothered with it. It's normalized. You're used to, experience this. And I think this is what you were talking about when you talked to Ardith. The normalization is just like that. This is how it should be. They are not elevated higher than us. We are not higher than them. They're just conscious beings having their experience of whatever they're experiencing. Does this resonate with you?
It absolutely does. And one of the things I've noticed, for the younger generation especially, what's the best way to segue right into this in a way that has decorum? I'm a big proponent of psychedelic drugs, huge proponent. And a lot of the younger people now, especially DMT, dimethyltryptamine, the chemical that your brain produces when you're dreaming or having a near-death experience, for the people that don't know, it's now available basically pretty accessibly. You can put it in a vape cartridge. And these younger people, not that I want to see anyone turn into a junkie or anything like that, but if you know anything about psychedelics, like that doesn't happen. You don't get people stealing your car stereo to pay for their LSD habit. It just doesn't work like that. That's a completely different class of drugs, and I don't even like the fact they're classified as drugs. But this is where we are in society. But these younger people, they talk about taking DMT and going to the spider room, these different rooms where they see these different beings, like giant spiders that then will weave webs of pure music for them. And it's changing their lives. And this is something that would not have happened when I was a teenager. The technology didn't exist. The world wasn't the way that it was. But now you could go on the dark web, or not even the dark web, and get DMT, psychedelic mushrooms, mushroom spores, acid, ayahuasca, something you would have had to go cultivate by hand in the Amazonian jungle. You could now have drop shipped to your home. And those substances have great value, in my opinion, in helping as long as you don't turn them into a crutch. Of course. But that's almost impossible. And as anybody who has experience with these substances knows.
I mean, I don't do drugs. I got other vices, so don't worry, darling.
I'm not worried.
You know my vices, don't you? Yeah. However, I've heard from many people, and this is what they're telling me. When they take, I'm not talking about crack cocaine. We're not going there, okay? We're talking about the organic hallucinogenics from Mother Earth. If they take it for social, nothing really happens. They get high, giggle, do stupid things, sometimes very dangerous things. But many have told me when they mature up a bit and they take it more serious, they respect the plant, and they go in with the right intention because they wish to expand their consciousness or to understand themselves better. As soon as they get that hit, they experience very similar beings, ET beings, whatever you want to call them, colors. You couldn't even articulate what color it was. And many, in fact, have gone through a period of a couple of years of hitting like the mushrooms or something, and all of a sudden they go, Okay, they've told me I don't need to take any more. It's done.
Right.
They're
That's
open.
what I was saying. Anyone that's familiar with these substances will understand those experiences.
Yeah.
You know, microdosing is very popular these days. You know,
Yeah.
you can get little gummies that have,
Yeah.
and it helps. You know, you don't, you know, as long as you have a healthy relationship with it, like anything else.
Healthy relationship. There's no addiction, and they also come to a point and say, "No, I don't need it no more." And because I looked at that, actually, because my process of self-realization wasn't through drugs. It was the being deciding it was going to wake up without external, substances to do it. So consciousness will experience all things at all times, all places, different ways of self-realization. And of course, mine come through that way. And I thought, well, why are they? At the beginning, I thought, well, why are they taking these substances when the being can self-realize? And it wasn't until later on I realized that it's the source experience in all things, all times. We're having the same experience of self-realization. However, we're all going to experience a different way of accessing it. And
Right.
when I got that, so no, I didn't run out and get a magic mushroom. I don't need to. I've done the process, so to speak. I'm really happy to see today that they're being they're coming off in this country. You can get a thing called a cam card now. They're producing medical marijuana. It's starting to. In America, you're more free, I know, and it is happening. And I'm really pleased to see that. I know you can buy it in gummy bears, even in this country. You can buy gummy bears and things like that. And it is microdoses, which is brilliant because you need to see how it's going to affect you. Not everyone can take something.
It's not going to, I don't think it'll be like that forever. I think this is just during this stage of our existence as a collective. You know, if somebody gets hold of a hit of acid, it's not necessarily on the surface level, they went out and procured it from a music festival or something.
Yeah.
But any physical object in your reality comes from your inner self anyway.
Yeah, there you go.
So if the tab of acid is the mechanism you need, and there's so much misinformation. Actually, I helped a friend of mine, without being too specific, we'll say we put him in touch with where to get psychedelic mushrooms. Really, and he happens to be from UK. And he tried it the first time, nothing happens, which is pretty commonplace actually. When people try it for the first time, usually nothing happens. And he tried it again, and he got back to me, and he's like, I feel so cheated by society because this experience I had an experience of being at one with all things, and being that I knew that he was British. I'm like, well, what did you expect to see? Like stuff from the Yellow Submarine movie? And he's like, exactly. If I listening to society, they had me believe that it was going to be this nonsensical thing.
Yeah.
But really, it just made me feel more connected than I'd ever been to everything around me.
So there's many paths to home. There's many paths to self-realization. I got to say, excuse me, another path to self-realization is the topic we've been discussing. The greys, the mantis, the dimensional beings, ET, whatever you want to call them. Because I know from a personal perspective, every time there was contact, I didn't know at the time, but we call them downloads, was in conscious expansion. And it was all about knowing who I was. So I think because I had a lifetime of contact like that, and it was the teaching of it. They would teach all different, too much information. I didn't go elsewhere. I didn't need to go elsewhere so there's another way. And I've heard from many guests on my show and people that I've just had conversations with, they've experiencing either just witnessing a UFO, and they go, it was watching me watch it. I said, there's your contact. You've done the contact. That's it. Expansion of consciousness just comes from that. When you know that they know that you know. I love saying that. It's quite confusing.
That's why I have my green laser.
Yeah, that's another form of this process. So you can go by natural herbs. You can go by the being will decide anyway when it's going to wake up. It's the being deciding which way it's going to, even though it's not sleep. It's going to come out of the dream. So there's another way through these ET and many experiences around the world. There's billions of us have said how not only did their spiritual awareness extend, their consciousness expanded to agree. They started to deconstruct who they thought they were, the identity they play, the idea. It's always about the idea you have about yourself. Like, I'm Gloria and I do criminology and all that crap. Do you know what I mean? That's not who I am. Yeah. But through ET contact, through gently coming in, just gently with them, it was like, like micro doses. Does that make sense to you, William?
Oh, yes. Yes. Yeah. Like, what's the word? The type of therapy where you're exposed to something a little bit over time until you.
That's it. Yeah. Yes. And so there's another way back to source. So, we've covered most areas. I hope we have, because we both wanted a conversation to really expand on the impact of having contact with these beings. Okay.
Well, if you can get to a place from.
Sorry, go on. Add anything to that.
Oh, no, that's what, just to reiterate what I was saying earlier. Like, I went from absolute terror of what was happening to me and social stigma to now I've got my little green laser light. I'm like, man, I wonder when those little gray guys are going to show up again. And I have been working with them more in the dream state. I had to hold this guy without getting into too many personal details or anything, but they've been coming around more and more frequently. And now that I understand what their goals are, what my own goals are, I'm trying to, one of the things that I do is when I meditate and I go into do my own trance work, I do channel also, not anything like Rob. It's only for my own private purposes. But when I go into that, I remember specific times when I was afraid as a child, and I'm trying to convey to my younger self who still exists that this is actually really cool. This is actually really, really cool, man. You should just chill out.
I mean, I always say, because hindsight's a bitch. If when I was a kid with all the things, even seeing, the dead people, they don't like me to call them dead, but I have to because I'm on a show, and all the experiences I had and all the, the roller coasters I went down, if I knew then what I know now, no matter what was going on in my reality, and in the reality it was shit, but I would have been like a kid playing in a playground, because basically that's what I'm doing now. I'm a kid playing in the playground. I'm in the play.
Well, that's that youth is wasted on the young thing that people keep saying all the time. Of course, if we knew then what we knew. I had no idea how lucky I was to be living in New York in the 1980s.
On this experience, it happened with the being, recalled who it was at the right time. I'm still human. I'm still an arsehole. I still fuck up. I still moan. I'm just being me. I'm playing the role of me, and that's who I am. Okay, I'm going to ask you this question. What, out of all the experiences so far, who, what, when, why has made the biggest impact on you in shifting your consciousness, your awareness towards the self-realization? Can you name it?
I would say hands down it has to be Seth Material, because I read all of those books. I got my hands on every single one of them, and that it was 2004, 2005, 2006, that time. I was driving this enormous white Cadillac from the 1980s with big comfortable red leather seats in it. I would go to the library. I would park under the only tree that was there. I would read Seth books until I fell asleep, and that's when I started having my out-of-body experiences also. Which later on I got to boost thanks to Robert Monroe at the Monroe Institute, which is who Rob credits with his channeling, by the way.
Yeah, he did that. He went way above that, didn't he? Oh my God, yeah, exactly.
It has to be the Seth Material. It has to be, and actually it has to be myself at the risk of sounding I am the one, because this information's out there for everybody. And, this is what's interesting to me. You mentioned that you had listened to Jane Roberts do channeling on some of the old videos that were fortunate enough to be preserved. I've tried showing those videos to people. Some people can't understand a word she's saying at all as Seth. So I don't get it. Like my grandmother, she was born in 1932. She was very educated, and as you know, they had a different style of education back then. It was more robust, shall we say. I would consider her hands down to have a far better vocabulary than I did, far better reading skills. I like to think I speak better than the average American too. I don't know. It's weird. I'd like to know.
You speak beautifully, darling.
Well, I like it. I like speaking. I like being a speaker, and so I'm kind of in love with the language.
Yeah.
And so, but the point of all that is that I would consider my grandmother to be leaps and bounds above me in the vocabulary and reading comprehension department. I gave her a copy of Seth Speaks when she was still alive. She told me she couldn't understand a word of it. And to me, it's like she doesn't. It's the energy behind it all.
It's going to be the energy. I mean, I was listening to something the other day. Someone, I can't remember who it was, because I'm trying to catch up on other people's shows, and someone said, "You know what? They were talking about some scientists, the fundamental scientists. If a UFO, a craft, I don't even like the word UFO now. If a craft landed right in front of them and beings came out and spoke to them, they still wouldn't believe it was real. That is because that limited conscious being, it's not the time for them to connect. It's the end. It's not, everything will be exactly as it should be when it should be, because the identity of who you think you are is not controlling. There's no doing to do anything. The being, it's the being, the source itself that makes that decision that is taking this journey. It's the being that's on the hearing's journey, not Gloria. She don't exist in truth. So, so not everyone is ready. But I tell you what, when someone is just about ready, you can spot them. They come into your world, into your worldview, into your perception. Even if they're in the background, just going like this, maybe moaning a bit, they're ready. They're on the peripheral edges of, and I've noticed so many people now, out of the blue, shifting, just on the edge, and talking UFO. What about aliens? I mean, we talk about your government and their disclosure, which is just a load of bollocks.
Don't talk too loudly; they're listening.
Yeah. However, they have brought it to global attention. It's okay to talk about this. That's all they've done.
Right.
Okay. And if they do try to bring in some threat thing, it's not going to work. So that's the only thing I can give them. If you're an experiencer, I totally agree with you. I don't need any government to tell me what I've experienced is true or not. Way back in the day, if you said the world was round, you'd be burnt at the stake because the government said it was flat, So it just goes to show. So, they have done one good thing. They brought it out that there's no more ridicule on that way, I think, if anything.
Right. Well, they're working. I wish that, it's a shame because I knew about aliens and things. I wish I had known. I don't know how many times we've all said this. I wish I knew then what I knew now. Yeah. But when I was in the Air Force, I was in the Air Force Space Command, which is the predecessor to what we now have as the Space Force. Yeah. I had top secret clearance. I could have gone anywhere, done anything. And I didn't ask a single question. I just did my job.
You just did your job. But isn't that sort of, that's a bit like, people that have repetitive contact and they go, I was there and I never even thought to get my mobile phone out to take a picture. Right. I've only caught them once, and that was last year, of a lifetime of experiences. And many times people said, why didn't I think to get my phone out just like you? You worked there. Why didn't I ask questions?
Oh, yeah. I knew all about and when I got to my barracks at that Air Force base, there was it might have also been another Whitley Strieber book that the previous occupant had left there, and I'm like, a book about Greys. I actually never read it, which was so weird to me that I've had this book. It's still on my bookshelf back at my house.
Yeah.
And now, I never really reflected on it back then. It's like, because actually I would have had access I would have had a lot of access, you know, and I would have doing what I wanted to do would have been a betrayal of my country, which has never stopped me in the past.
No.
Because my country certainly betrayed me many times every chance it gets.
But it just goes to show that each being, I say we are the gods. We're all gods. Even the arseholes are gods. When that being decides to terminate the play, to bring in the credits to the film, it will do it. Yeah. So you could have all of this, like I said, you could have a craft come in front of you, beings come out, Jesus himself could come. You still not gonna, if the beings not it's not in the script to wake up now. But however, later on down their timeline, that experience they've had will then open up, because if you observe a craft and something happens where you know they're watching you, that's contact, that's communication. Could say a download's already gone in, and when the time's right, the being will open that out and say, okay, I'm calling in that, it's time to do this. Does that make sense with you?
No, it absolutely does, because now that I'm thinking about it, as you're saying these things, like if I had gotten access to the files that I'm thinking about now, if it was the right time, I would have done it. Yeah. Basically back then.
And you wouldn't have gone down the road, and you would have been on a different timeline. Maybe you did on another timeline. Maybe that's what you did. You wouldn't have met Rob. You wouldn't have met, oh God, I'm in love with Treb, Rob and Kalina.
I wanted to say that. I definitely have to give a consolation thank you to Rob for allowing me to talk to Ardif in this way. I know it's what I do is a huge help to Rob. We're not going to pretend that it's not. But the fact that I get there and to talk to Ardif in such a pedestrian way is really, you know, because I felt after having talked to him for a long time, I can feel him around. Like if I'm in the shower, I don't know why these beings always come to you when you're nude, but if I'm having ideas like, oh, I'd love to ask Ardif this, I kind of feel him around, and the answer just kind of comes to me like, well, that makes sense now. And that's what I was saying earlier, is that you can tell. I don't want to ever judge anyone for what they do when they ask questions, but I've noticed talking to Ardif over the years, the questions have changed. Like people are like, oh, when am I going to get financial independence? You know, when am I going to get this job? And now I'm almost running out of questions to ask him, because the answer is always basically the same thing. Like whenever you make the internal changes you need to get to that point, that's when these things are going to happen for you. Yeah. He's not a fortune teller. No. And I would never ask, like for me, I was poor for a long time, you know, like, oh, am I going to hit the lottery? Am I going to, which seems almost stupid to ask now. Am I going to do this, that, and the other thing? And then through my own personal development, well, now I run the third largest private ATM company in my state. I'm making good money now. And it's only because, but if you had given me that money, if you had given me 3 times as much money back then, I would have lost it.
You wouldn't have done the internal work. You wouldn't have done it.
It comes, and it's such a cliche answer, and it's not satisfying to some people. You know, it sounds like fortune cookie wisdom, but you can make anything you want happen to if you live and breathe that experience and work through anything that comes up.
Absolutely. I got to say, I love the balance tonight. You keep shout out to Ardif, and we've got the balance, Rob, and I'm Treb. You know, your two main. Rob does channel others, but you know, I don't click with Ardif. I find him a bit. It reminds me of when I was back at university. Put it that way. You know what I mean? So I got, you know. So you're Ardif, I'm Treb, and that's a good balance for the show to have these two energies in. Shout out Rob's network and everything. Let's give him a shout out.
Oh, definitely. Well, he is the ET Whisperer. You can find him. I believe his website's etwhisperer.com. I'm going to double check on that. I know you can go to etmerch.net because I run that website for him, and you can find a way. You can get access to his mainline site by going to etmerch.net. You can support him on Patreon. If you support him on Patreon, you get special access. RobGauthier.com. He definitely has that one. I think that's where it's at, robgauthier.com. If you can't find him there, you're not going to find him anywhere. And certainly check out the ET Whisperer on YouTube. But if you support him on Patreon, his lowest tier is $11, and there's certainly no shame in doing this. Like, say you have a particular question and you don't want to get a whole session with him for various reasons. You could do him that when it comes to question and answer night. You could submit a question, it gets answered, then you don't have to support him the next month if that's what you need, you know. But we always do special stuff for the people that are there on Patreon that are supporting Rob, because that allows him to do the other types of work that he does. He's got, I don't know that he has any events coming up. I keep trying to get him to come down to the Monroe Institute here in Virginia. It's only about an hour and a half from where I'm sitting right here in Fincastle is the Monroe Institute. And because that's how Rob learned how to channel, we thought it would be appropriate for him to come and do a session there. We've got, last year I spent about 2 weeks at the Seth House in Elmira, New York. There are some people.
Yes, share this story. You told me. Yeah, go and share this.
Okay, well, for those of you who know about the Seth Material, and I can't imagine if there's anyone out there that doesn't, read the book Seth Speaks or The Nature of Personal Reality, both by Jane Roberts, if you want to get well acquainted by the Seth Material. Just go to whichever one of those calls you to it first, whichever one you happen to find. But the house in Elmira, New York, where Jane did the majority of that channeling, was in disrepair for a number of years. And two wonderful women, Kate and Oshara, have since purchased the house. They're renovating it and turning it into a Seth museum/education center. So we were able to get out there. Carolina and I went there last year. We spent 2 weeks there living in Jane's apartment, sleeping in her bed. And Rob and I did a show, one of his Patreon shows. I broadcasted from the spot in Jane's kitchen where she channeled Seth. And Rob is trying to get together a channel panel that will be happening there once the ladies are ready for it. We're going to help do a fundraiser to support them. If you feel so moved to support those women over there, they certainly can use it. They have a noble goal in mind, and are, after spending time with them, they are the two people on this entire planet that are best suited to take on that task, because I couldn't do what they're doing. They're in the perfect place at the perfect time. Their heart is in it like you can't believe. And Rob's eventually going to do a channel panel down there. He has he's got a Discord, he's got a Facebook, he's got a YouTube. He's on New Technology, BitChute, Odyssey.
Just type his name into it.
Rob Gauthier.
Yeah, he's got on YouTube. There's numerous videos you can access.
Right, all for free.
All for free. Every so often he sets out. He releases something that was on Patreon. He releases it out for free for everyone to watch. If I mean, William's going to say, yeah, listen to Ardif, and I'm going to go, no, listen to Treb.
No, listen to whomever you're called to.
Yeah. Because Treb for me is, it's just amazing. And, what Rob does, how he shifts people, not even into channeling or self-realization. He also does the work to help you heal yourself. Does that make sense?
Oh, I've experienced it.
Yeah, he does that. He does that himself. So there's such a benefit if you connected with Rob's site and connected with Rob. Now, Kalina texted me earlier on. Well, me and Rob will watch a show later. They're at an appointment with Lily. So they're going to watch this later. So hi, Rob. Hi, Kalina.
Hi, guys. I'll be seeing you in another couple days to do the show. So,
William, I cannot thank you. I knew it would be a great show.
Well, I'm glad.
It's been brilliant.
I was thinking, Ardif has a British accent, which has a whole funny story behind it. I don't think people from the UK really understand. Americans just implicitly trust a British accent for some reason. It sounds more dignified and
trust me. Don't trust me. Maybe I'm attracted. No, one thing about Treb is it's not Ardif's English accent. It's the joy when he's always happy. The joy.
Right. Oh no, I get that from Treb. I like I said, when I may have a session with him, but like I said, for various reasons, it's just the intellect of Ardif. And I know.
Hold on a second. A guy in in the audience says, could you spell Rob's last surname? Can you spell it?
Gauthier, like Gautier, I guess, if you were French. Gauthier, Gauthier.
There you
think
go,
I got
sweetie. So
Did I do that right? Now I'm second guessing myself. Yeah, Rob Gauthier, Gauthier.
there you go. There you
Would have
go.
been ridiculous if I got that wrong.
Oh, it would be, yes. Yeah, it would be. So do check him out. I mean, but tonight's show, it's William I wanted to get to know tonight. And thank you, because it's really been a deep, fascinating conversation. We've been everywhere. There's a lot of other places we could have gone, but time, we've gone part, we're an hour and 20 minutes. So I'm going to invite you back onto open mic. Yeah, you and your fucking egg timer. You did that the other day. All right, stop it. I'm going to invite you back. We'll chat again soon onto Open Minds. It's a Sunday night show, but not when you're doing the show with Rob. And bring it to that audience over there. But thank you so much, sweetie, for coming on, William.
It's no problem. I'm happy to be here.
All right. So, and thank you everybody that's joined us live tonight, or those that are going to watch on the replay, like Robert Kalina. Take from the show anything that resonates with you. If something doesn't resonate with you, put it to one side. And I just want to shout out one more time. I do recommend, if you're interested to find out more about what Rob's about, follow Rob Gauthier, E.T. Whisperer, or go and look up the Seth Talks. Go into that. Not one thing suits everybody. So go around, do a bit of, go around the houses a bit. But I think you'll find, if you listen to Rob Gauthier, it'll just resonate straight away. Something about the guy, isn't it?
Oh yeah, there is. There's a couple people, like Neville Goddard has that that quality to him that is just, it's exceptional material. I put Rob in that category as Neville Goddard, Jane Roberts, right up there. And I have to say, before, I would be remiss, in fact, if I didn't say before I left, that I have a special affinity for the British people. I did live in Leeds one summer in 1995 as part of the exchange program, and actually attended Allerton High School, if there's anyone out there that knows that. So
you see. Oh, one thing you haven't promoted, you shared something with me the other day. You're going to do this book. I shared it on my profile on my Facebook for you.
Oh, which one? The Oneironaut that we're doing?
Yeah.
Oh, yeah, that's we don't know which network is going to pick it up yet, but that's something that Rob and I are doing as part of I'm serving as producer on that capacity. And I have a friend of mine that I went to high school with who is an acclaimed director, very good at what he's doing. And his name is Ian Kyle, actually. And Rob, Ian, and I were talking about how when we were growing up, we all loved the same types of shows that we had mentioned earlier in this program, Arthur C. Clarke, you know, In Search. And we wanted to do something like a sort of a paranormal mystery show in that vein as an homage to what had shaped us into who we are. So that's something we're going to look at, bizarre mysteries that have captivated human beings. I won't say which ones yet because they're it's going to be a surprise. But we're going to do the whole show. The format of the show is going to be a little mini documentary or blurb talking about the mystery itself and why it's unsolved. We'll say Bigfoot, for instance. You know, and then Rob is going to channel an appropriate being to try and give some insight on that particular unsolved mystery or situation or event.
So watch this space. I did actually share that little clip on my Facebook wall. I did share it and I tagged you and Rob into that. So
it's called The Oneironaut.
The Oneironaut. So
Traveler of the Dream World.
I don't think we've forgotten everything. I think we've covered everything. So thank you so much, William. This is Inception Podcast. I'm Gloria. Until the next time we chat. Bye, guys.
Bye, everyone.